Salve and welcome. Today we are in John chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. That's as far as we're going to go today in our new system of taking half of one of these pages per video. This is our rubric, everything that we're looking for as we go through the text. Let's go ahead and get started. Et deficiente vino dicit mater Jesu ad eum, vinum nam habent, et dicit e Jesus quid mihi et tibi est mulier, non dum venit ora mea. That's as far as we're going to go today. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first sentence, see if we can find our verb. We have et, which is a coordinating conjunction, and as I said at the beginning of the video, just like we had at the beginning of verse 1, this is very nice to find these at the beginnings of the sentences. They just remind us that this is part of a greater context. It's, if you will, a warning to make sure you know what happened beforehand, because this is still connected to everything beforehand. This is something that we should do whenever we run into words like however, but, although, anything like that in a English translation of something else just reminds us that this verse doesn't stand alone. There's more meaning around it that will clarify what it says. Moving on, deficiente does appear at first to be a verb. Our stem, defici, is from a verb, but this is not a verbal ending here. Nte is actually a participial ending, so that can't be it. We know is a noun, and here we go. Dicit. We have it as our ending, which is going to be a third person singular. This comes from dico, dicere, dixi, so this is present tense. It is active, and it is indicative. It means says. Now we know that we have a singular subject. We're going to take a look ahead, and we've got mater there. And that is a nominative form of our third declension noun for mother. So that is our subject, which is very nice. And as we took a look previously in verse 1, Jesu right there is the possessive form of this strange noun. So it's going to be of Jesus. Oops, says. Mother of Jesus says, and then we've got ad eum, a prepositional phrase. This one is taking the accusative case, as this preposition always does, showing us location towards which normally, for me, I would expect to see a indirect object, a dative right there, but this also works. The same function says something to someone, indirect object, and says something to someone, directional. So, yeah, it still works. Venum is the same case, however, him and venum, those two wouldn't make sense for them to go together. This could be acting as a demonstrative in some situations, but probably not here. I'm going to put a tentative bracket there until we have figured out the greater context to know if I'm actually correct in that. To him, singular, masculine from is id. Moving back to deficiente vino. Deficiente, with this nt ending here, we know that it's going to be a present tense participle. This e is only ever going to be ablative in form. So take a look at we know. We know is also ablative in form. We've got a verbal adjective and a noun, both of them in the ablative, neither of which, unless I'm wrong over here, appear in this clause, which means we have a special construction. But before we get to that, we should properly identify these. We know is, of course, ablative, as I said, and it is singular, and now I can't remember. Yeah, it's going to be neuter. It's not venus, it's venum, so it's neuter. And then deficiente is ablative, singular, also neuter, present. We got the present participle ending right there, and it is active. There's no passive present participle. And it is, of course, participle. So the construction that we have going on here between our verbal adjective in the ablative and our noun in the ablative is this thing called the ablative absolute. It's always fun to run across those, but they're not always easy to translate. You need context of the main clause, which we already did right here, to understand what idea might the author intend here. And even then, with all the different options there are for the ablative absolute, you're more likely than not going to be wrong, unless you have a lot more experience than I do. And a lot of other people probably. So, ablative absolute, ABL. Okay, so our first way of translating this, the lazy person's way of translating it would be, and with failing of wine. Our next way of translating it, we could use the word when failed wine. When wine failed. And then since is the next most likely. No, they're not ranked. It's just those are the three that I remember most easily. Since wine failed. No, these two sound like they're passive, but they're not actually. That's just the meaning of the verb right there. It's going to be an intransitive verb. It's going to take its action onto its subject. So we have these three to choose from. Any of them are most likely going to work. This one, as I said, is the lazy one. These two are the more sophisticated, and there are a bunch of other different ways we could do it, but let's just keep it to those three and move on. And since wine failed, mother of Jesus says to him. And it looks like we enter direct discourse here. Let's go to the verb in that, which is habent. This ENT here is going to tell us that it's third person plural. This is a second conjugation verb, habeo, habere. So this E tells us that it is present tense and, of course, indicative. The ending, NT, tells us it's active. And it would be they have. Non just means not, negating our verb. And venum, it can't be the subject because uum is a singular ending. So it has to be the direct object, which means my parentheses right here is correct. Okay, direct discourse starting right there. Accusative as the direct object. Singular and neuter. Wine. Wine they have not. Starting with verse 4, et dicit. Dicit here indicates to us that our direct discourse ends at the end of the previous verse. Let's close that off. Et is just and. Dicit we've translated, we've parsed before, so we don't need to do that again. Just say says. Ei comes from is, id. This is going to be the dative singular form. It doesn't have a gender since all three of them share the same form, both for the dative and for the genitive. Two. And since the two who were talking beforehand are Mater and Jesu, and Ei is singular, so it can't be the disciples, the mother is the most likely option, so I'm going to say to her. And Jesus has his nominative singular ending right there. Don't need to parse that again. So he's our subject. And Jesus says to her. Then we have direct discourse starting again right here. Let's find our verb first. Quid mihi et tibi est. There's our verb. From sum esse fui futurus. This is third person singular. It is present, active, and indicative, meaning is. Going back to the beginning of this clause, we've got quid from quisquid, an interrogative. Quid here tells us that this is going to be neuter. Mihi and tibi are the wrong forms to be the subject of est, so this is going to be nominative singular neuter. Which means we would translate it what. And then mihi and tibi, those are our personal pronouns. They are both in the dative case. The I's there tell us. And they're both singular. Neither of them have genders, which is normal. All of the genders use the same one. They mean to me, it's referent, and to you. What is to me and to you? We might want to throw in the word it for clarity's sake in English. We always want to be careful about adding words unless the context specifically says it. Mulier here appears to be either nominative or vocative in form. Since we've already got our nominative right there, this could be acting as a predicate, but that doesn't make any sense. What is mother? Or sorry, not what is mother. What is woman? To me and to you. That doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm going to assume that vocative is the most likely option right there. Vocative, singular, And of course feminine, comma, comma, woman. We want to find our next verb now. We've got when it has it as its ending. This is going to be a third person singular. When o venire, weni. We can't tell what tense this is without taking a look at the Greek. And since we don't have the long marks provided for us, so we're going to have to mark it as either present or perfect. And it's active and indicative. So it means either come or came. So we want a singular subject. So that does mean that I could be wrong about mulier being the subject. Sorry, being vocative, it could in fact be the subject of this verb. However, we've got hora mea. Hora could be either nominative or ablative singular. So we would have two different ways of translating the sentence. Our first way would be, assuming I'm correct about vocative, my hour come or came. Or the second way, where we would have to treat these as ablative, and then it would be an ablative of time within which, or an ablative of time when. So it would be woman come on my hour, within my hour. Woman came on my hour or within my hour. And that sounds a bit weird, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the conversation that they've had beforehand. So vocative makes the most sense here, and nominative makes the most sense here. And then we have one final word to take a look at, and that's non-doom. Non means not, and doom would normally by itself mean while, but this, when they're paired on together, they mean not yet. Since this is vocative, I'm going to put another comma right there. And that is all of our translation. So let's take a look at it in its own context from 3 to 4, and then the whole thing together. And since wine failed, mother of Jesus says to him, they have not, let's put a do. They do not have wine. And Jesus says to her, what is it to me and to you, woman? My hour not yet comes or came. I'm going to do is come, just to make it a little bit clearer in English. And frankly, the present tense sounds more likely. It's a bit awkward to say, woman, my hour has not come yet. Well, it has not come. I suppose that could work, so I'll add that in as an option. But there we go. That's everything. Oh, no period. Whatever. Up to there from verse 1. And on third day, wedding happened in Cana of Galilee, and mother of Jesus was there. But Jesus also was called, and disciples his, to wedding. And since wine failed, mother of Jesus says to him, they do not have wine. And Jesus says to her, what is it to me and to you, woman? My hour is not yet come, or has not yet come. And there we go. That's everything up through verse 4. Thank you very much for joining me. On Friday, if things go as planned, I'm going to be releasing the video where we take a look at how well this Latin text pairs up with the Greek text, as we've done before. And I hope everything that we've done today has been helpful for you. Have a good day. Wale. Hey, not asleep yet? That's okay. I've got tons of other videos that are equally sleep-inducing. Check them out. Alternatively, you could take a look at this video over here,